Welcome, everybody. I guess since we just hit record, I should say hello and welcome. Um, we are just, we're as always, we're heavily scripted here. So I just hit the record button. It's like, oh yeah, I guess we should say hi to all of you guys that have joined us as we're trying to figure out what do we want to talk about in our podcast today. I do want to give like this little bonus thing. Um, Went back and was listening to the podcast for like recent episodes since we like, and I haven't done that much in the last, I don't know, several weeks. And I was going to give you a little feedback, and it's actually, so I was thinking about it, and I was going to do it off air, off camera, but I was thinking, it may be something good for anybody that's been doing podcasting or wants to get into podcasting, because it is um, it's an acquired skill, I think. I mean, some people are natural to it, but like some people are just born with like radio voice and some of that kind of stuff. But most people, and you'll see this with really any other podcast series. Like you want to go back and look at like Gary Vaynerchuk when he was doing his original, like the first 100 episodes of Wine Library TV. He's still Gary. He's still like a little over the top and F bombs everywhere and some stuff like that. But he wasn't the same until you get it like, I don't know, 400 or 500 episodes in. And like Tim Ferriss, the same one. You go back to the very early stuff. It's nothing like of course, now he's got like, heavily produced stuff. And so what I was doing is listening to you and I in our interactions. And this brought up, a couple of things that how I've seen myself grow and change, especially as we went to this format. And then also you, as I've talked to you before, we've done stuff. And then also you doing some of the original, like we'll call it the unaired pilot episodes that you did. And then as we got into that, one of the things that's always been that we've talked about a lot over time is from a podcast view is getting away from a lecture kind of thing. Is because you want to engage with the audience. Yes, you people out there, you want to engage with them even though they're not there. And so one of the things that I think has helped immensely is that we're actually talking to somebody. I noticed it for myself when I went to video instead of pure audio, but I went to video interviews. Even though I didn't record it, I didn't send the video out. Just the fact of talking to somebody and being able to see them, in this virtual sense, my mic just keeps like popping out, wants to show itself there. That it was one of those things that it suddenly became less rigid or something like that. So there's a little personality that came out of it. I was noticing that listening to you is that it is funny because it's like I've done this for a while and you've done this for all of a very short period of time, and I'm especially in this I'm a little more animated. I have a lot of fun, and you're still, I think what you're the way we talked about it is, and because Natalie and I were assessing ourselves and where we're at, stuff like that, is it's almost like feel free to slow down, because I don't. And I was actually surprised. I was like, should I slow down? It's like, no, I guess have done this enough that I still enunciate very well. Even when I talk really, really fast, I can still get the words out. But I think I think it may be part of it is you sort of match my speed a little bit, but then it throws you off because that's not natural to you, or at least it's not yet. And so when we go through, particularly like I throw something out to you, it's like, hey, what do you think? Feel free to like slow it down a little bit. And it goes back to actually what we talked about when we were working on the Sprint QA stuff, is having to, we had to really slow down and enunciate, because we were talking a lot of people, they were like English is a second language. And so it was blowing their heads up to try to keep up with us when we started rolling. And so it's just a little feedback there. I hope that, I hope you see where we're going with that. And we'll just sort of see. I hate doing it in a sense because it's very generic, but I'm hoping that it's something that connects, because we were talking about for a little bit of like, what are the pluses, the pros and the cons, and the pluses, the minuses, and how this change in format has adjusted stuff. And listening to you and listening to me and stuff like that. And I was trying to figure out like the best way to describe it. So hopefully that makes some level of sense to you. It's just as a helpful hint kind of thing.
Yeah, and it happens a lot, especially kind of with you and me. When we get excited about a topic or we really get into something, you tend to forget you're talking to people sometimes because you're not really interacting with them face to face. So it's like, whoops, I may have just rambled off a whole bunch of stuff really quickly. It's like, uh-oh. But you can't necessarily roll it back uh, in a presentation like this. So you have to kind of watch that. And I do try to keep it tempoed, but there are times where it's like, oh, it's an exciting topic, and I forget. And you do too. I mean, we all do. But like you
Hmm.
said, though, you've done enough of these where you're comfortable enough to pronunciate and speak clearly enough. The other thing too, I think, is I've tried to use my mic, my big pop mic like you, and it hasn't come through as well on the
Hmm.
MacBook. So I've actually had to go to just using the MacBook for our podcasts right now.
Oh, so you're
Next,
using you're using your MacBook mic as opposed to your USB mic or your other mic?
yeah, today I'm
Oh,
actually
wow.
using the headphones because I'm not at home. But typically it's just the laptop. I'm just speaking into it. You're coming out of the speakers, and it's just one
That's
strip
that's
machine.
funny. That's actually a neat little side note. I have tried when I first worked with this stuff, when I was testing stuff, my MacBook was not bad. It like I would use my MacBook, and this is 15 years ago almost now. This is back when I was going to create an audio book before I wrote the book. I was like, I don't want to write. That's too much work. I'm just going to speak. And I realized that speaking sucked. It didn't work for me. So for that piece, but my mic was really good. I could do it and it sounded great. Since then, I've gotten so I've used my mic. I've had this mic for year. Well, this one is newer, but before that, I used an external mic. And when I would go back, it didn't sound right. Things weren't coming through right. And so now if I try to go back, I had a mic break on me not too long ago, and one of the wires was wonky or whatever. And I was talking through my laptop, and everybody's like, I can't hear you, I can't understand. So I don't know if the mic had moved. Maybe the mic is just I haven't used it enough and it's like got dirt in it or something like that. But your sound, it's amazing because I feel like I need to have a microphone, a separate microphone. And yeah, yours, obviously yours works awesome because it sounds good. So it's funny. I wonder how much of that is like, and yours is your laptop is the whatever the M1, right? So it's
M1,
it's
yeah, it's
really
the first gen.
yeah, and this is yeah,
Now
the
there's
laptop's
a
an
trick
M2,
to
but
this
it's
though.
what was that?
So there is a trick to it.
Hmm.
Especially if you have an external one and you go back and forth, your internal settings do not necessarily flip over to the new mic. So your other mic settings might be applied to the local desktop mic,
Mm.
and it may not sync. So I always make sure that if I'm switching, I go into like Zoom or whatever the recording is. First, I open up systems and I make sure everything's maxed. And then I go into Zoom and then I tweak Zoom to be happy with me speaking. So another little bonus, I guess, for those of
Yeah,
you
there you
that
go,
are
boys and girls.
watching.
You got 2 for 1 today.
Because a lot of times, especially with like Slack or things like that, they take their own audio settings, and there's a lot of times where it switches on me, where I've always used like the desktop or I use my pop mic, but then I all of a sudden I'm in the call and it's using the desktop. It's like, okay, this is strange. So I've always gotten the habit if I'm doing a presentation or a recording to always check the settings first if I'm in a new environment. But essentially, what you do, especially like for something like Zoom, go into your system, set everything to max, then go into your tool and tweak it from the program. I've noticed that if you do it that way, you get a better audio experience in general than if you try to let the software bump it up versus the hardware bump it up.
Those are good points. And that actually gives me an idea for a podcast for this one is I don't think we've talked about I think we've talked about it here and there, but I don't think it's ever been a podcast tip thing. And I don't know if we've even written an article. I think it just came up in prior like mastermind stuff. And it is the idea of essentially doing a presentation or speaking, like if you're going to do like like a meetup, or you're doing some sort of presentation or something like that, or even like, if you've got a class that you're teaching, and it's particularly if it's not your home, class and environment. Some of the things about how do you do it, like what are some good things to know when you're going to demo software, when you're going to present something, because like those are perfect points. It's like, hey, get in there and like plug all your crap up and make sure that you've got all your settings right for that environment, because inevitably, as you know, well, and you're like the master of that. I don't want to steal the spoiler, but you've got like 4 million little plug types, because you're always going to have whatever plug you need. You're not going to have unless you have all of them, basically. So, how about that and I'll just like, we'll see where it goes. But I was saying, hey, that could be a pretty good episode, unless you got
Yeah,
an idea.
I like that one. We'll see how it goes. I may have some bonus material at the end for some additional audio software and tools that we could use.
Mhm.
It just depends where the conversation goes. But if we get to the end and we haven't really touched on any software, bump me if I don't remember it. Just kind of ping me on that, and we'll kind of throw that out as a bonus because I got a couple ideas on that.
Yeah, because we can do that. Because actually, me and my son, my youngest son, is going into video production and stuff like that, and he's special effects is where he wants to go. So he spent the last couple of years doing that kind of stuff, and we were talking actually about Adobe's suite of stuff, because he's, as a student, he gets it free, so he uses um Premiere is the primary thing he does, and he says, and everything plugs right into that. So he uses that quite a bit. And I was talking a little bit about audio side, and he goes, well, actually, you can do all that within Premiere. And then he mentioned the other one that everybody uses is the one that you mentioned, that you always use. It's an artist name, I think.
But Audacity or
No, it's not iMovie. It is
GarageBand?
no. Uh, is it? I want to say it's like Michelangelo, but it's not Michelangelo. It's something like that. I think it's a name. It's video.
Da Vinci. Da
Da
Vinci.
Vinci. There we go. I was like, I knew it was something like that. And he said, "Oh yeah, Da Vinci's great." And I said, "Yeah, actually, Michael's been telling me for a long time that that's awesome." And we started talking about, I guess there's plugins for all this stuff that I didn't even know all the stuff that's in there. And so,
Well, and it's funny with that too.
So,
Like, I've actually gone back to just using iMovie. I've actually figured out how to use its audio editor to do a lot of the manipulation I need there, and I don't ever get out of iMovie for anything now.
yeah, for the YouTube stuff so I never got out of it. I got what I needed, because really all I needed was to level it to a certain point. So it was loud enough. And then after that, it was fine. I had all my settings on my mics enough, so I didn't have to do a whole lot of stuff. And almost never edited the audio purely. I would just, if I needed to pull something else, I could just pull out, like a whole section of video plus audio. So the only time I went into audio only was I used, Adobe Audition forever for the podcast, purely for the podcast.
I still do it with iMovie, because essentially what I do is I just extract the audio from the podcast section, extend the video portions, drop in the intro and outro, and then I can actually add the faders to those, attach them, and export the audio. So I never get out of iMovie now. It really cuts down on a lot of the time it takes to do a lot of our edits for our videos and our production.
Yep. Lots of good points. So we will definitely throw this out to you. So hello and welcome back. We are continuing our season 21 of the Building Better Developers Developreneur podcast. This episode, we're going to talk about presenting and demos, and not so much about the technical stuff, although we will get into that a little bit, but more about the non-technical things and the things that you will do that will shoot yourself in the foot if you don't go at it with the right attitude, or if you assume, what they always say is, if you assume something, you're going to look like crap in front of your boss or somebody like that. So we're going to talk about that this episode. But first, I got to introduce myself, because that's what I do. I am Rob Broadhead. I am one of the founders of Developreneur, also the founder of RB Consulting. You can check us out on the web and all that kind of good stuff. Basically, Developreneur is where we build better developers. RB Consulting is we take those developers and we go out and we solve problems and leverage technology to simplify, automate, integrate, all that good stuff. But the other thing we do is we talk to Michael all the time, and I'm actually using his name. Shoot, I was going to make him introduce more, but I'll at least tease that that's his first name. Go ahead and finish up that introduction.
Hey everyone, my name is Michael Malash, another co-founder of Developreneur. I'm also the founder of Envision QA, where we help small to mid-sized businesses and small healthcare clinicians build software and test software for existing applications.
So I want to talk about presentations and demos because we actually beforehand, for those of you that are here and watching us, hey, you already know this, so sorry to be repetitive, redundant, but we were talking about like some of the things we've run into, particularly from a technical point of view, and we talked about microphones and some things like that. One of the things and that's what triggered this episode, was how many times I have gone to a demo of some sort where I am I am the presenter, or I am watching somebody present. And this includes demos. It includes some, speakers, usually not a huge place, but it's, if you go to like meetups or smaller conferences, like the side rooms and conferences and stuff like that. And actually even back to, college days when somebody would come in that was a guest speaker or something like that. Anytime you go into an environment that you don't own, that you don't know, then there's some things that you need to be aware of. And these things are going to help you, speed your way through it and make it look smooth, even if it's not, because you're going to get this stuff smoothed out before you have witnesses to the event. Now, one of the things is get all of your stuff that you're going to use to present, get there early, depending on how it is, usually at least like 15 minutes, usually more like a half hour to 45 minutes early. I would say early enough. Think about, what if you show up and you have to run to the store to get something? What kind of time frame do you need to be able to do that and still be able to do your presentation? Because I have literally had that happen. I have seen that happen many times where somebody gets there and it's like, oh, the remote that you really need for your presentation, it had batteries and they're dead. And so you got to run down the corner store or wherever it's at and go get batteries because nobody has spares. It's things like that happen. It is Murphy's Law, where if it can go bad, if it can go wrong, it will. This includes things like you're going to go to a very modern place with modern tools, and you're going to find out that the only way that they have to connect from your video to your laptop is, I don't know, like jumper cables or something weird like that. They're going to have something that's just so backwards or so brand new that's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about this. I will give you a really quick example, and not to like put somebody on the spot, but hey, I just recently got married, and we, the night before, put all our audio stuff together, and we had it, like, we figured it out. It was somebody else's place. And it was such a mess that it was just like, okay, I'm going to take a common iPhone. We're going to plug it in. We're just going to run the music through that. Awesome. Worked, tested out. Everything's great. Next day, come in, and the guy that's the DJ had not done that. He didn't show up beforehand. He had a newer iPhone. So where we had everything we needed for the old, non-USB-C or whatever it is, the original Apple, or the most recent one back Apple plug, he didn't have that. And so they ended up actually spending time trying to find a way to get a dongle into that. And finally they had to find somebody else's phone and copy stuff over. And it was a mess. And it was all because assumptions, because it's like, oh, it should be fine. Don't ever trust anybody else to do it. Use your equipment, check it out. Before I throw this over to Michael, I will go one more step outside of that technical side. If you're doing a demo, if you're doing especially if it's a sales presentation or if it's a class that you're teaching, one, make sure you have your slides, whatever they are. Make sure you check your slides for things like, I don't know, spelling errors and stuff like that. Like, just make sure you're running through them, verify that they're okay. Make sure that they're in order. Make sure that you didn't lose some. Make sure that you have, like, I always have like a folder that I make specifically for that beforehand. And then when I get there, the first thing I do is I open that folder and make sure that all the stuff I need is in there. So you're not searching your drive for it. You're not suddenly like, oh crap, I put it on Dropbox and it disconnected on me this morning or something like that. It doesn't hurt to even have it like on a little USB drive that you could plug in as a backup. And don't change anything. Especially if it's code, like seal that code off, put it somewhere so it is standalone so that you don't touch it and nobody else touches it. Because I don't know how many times I've gone in to do that like last minute change and everything's wrong. And it just ruins the whole thing. Now I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to let Michael share his experiences and his thoughts on this, because I know you, sir, have done this a few times as well, especially with your educational background. I bet you got some great stories.
Well, it's funny because, I was at your wedding and me and Renee both commented that, your bag of tricks is sitting at the house with the dogs. Otherwise, you could probably fix their problem in about 5 minutes. Given the problem, I don't go anywhere without my bag of tricks. So I'm one of those, I get not paranoid people that, I'm afraid I'm going to go into a situation for a presentation, a meeting, whatever. And there's been way too many times where things break or it doesn't work, or to Rob's point, the code broke or changed and now you can't present. So a lot of things that I've learned over the years let me give you a few little tidbits. So to build on Rob's point, you could be like me and basically go buy a cookie cutter everything that you always need with you and just carry it with you. There's enough of these little pocket or even wallet size kits you can get for a lot of your USB cables, micro HDMI, and they're all USB plugins. It's kind of really cool. But if you don't want to go that route, if you're going into like a call, presentation, we kind of talked about this before jumping into the podcast, you always want to make sure that you are familiar with the tools that you're using. So for instance, we're using Zoom to record our call here. So the cool thing with this is Zoom has its own capabilities at the start of every call. You can say, test my sound settings, test my video settings. And you click that, and then you can make sure you can hear the audio coming out of the call. You can also test your mic, make sure you can hear yourself coming out of your mic. Behind that, though, that is more of a software adjustment tool to using your internal audio and microphone. Within your operating system or whatever machine you're using, there are machine level applications for your specific operating systems, Windows, Mac, whatever. And you need to also make sure that those are configured correctly as well. Because if you have your sound turned way down on your mic at the hardware level, it doesn't matter how good your software is, it's not going to really be able to boost your audio that well. That being said, if you go to the hardware direction where you get like these external microphones like me and Rob use, or you use your desktop audio, you again need to make sure you have the right drivers. You need to make sure that the software that comes with those works. And if you're using like soundboards and things of that nature, you want to make sure that you mark where your settings are for your calls, because if someone comes in and changes that, now you're going to be spending hours trying to get that set up again. Now, to carry this one step further, so you take from the setup approach. Anytime I go anywhere, like Rob said, if you have a presentation or something like that, make sure you have a backup. So typically, I will always print whatever I take with me. I still have paper copies, but I also carry an iPad, which also has a downloaded copy of the document, and I have my MacBook with me, which has a physical copy of the file. In case both of those fail, I also have a backup on my keychain. I have a USB little thumb drive that just sits on my keychain in case of emergencies. I always throw a file on there if I'm going to go present. Right there, you now have 4 places where you have your presentation. So if you fail at that point, it's out of your hands. There's just nothing you can do. But if you at least have the paper and you can't plug in, you can still have your notes, you can still talk and present the material to people, and you should be okay to do that. Now, if you're in a big auditorium, you might lose your voice because you're going to have to shout very loud if nothing works, but hey, it can be done. Carry that over a little bit more with the presentation. So you talked about the code, don't make changes to the code. With the presentation piece, what I've had to do in the past is if you have code that is kind of a work in progress or a proof of concept, sometimes it's better to take screenshots of that code or mock-ups of that code and throw it into something like PowerPoint or something like presentation where you can actually mock it up, make it look user-friendly. And if you're really good at it, you can do it in such a way that your slides go with the way you click the application. So like if you click a button to change the screen, the next slide would basically be click, oh, hey, this is what it will look like. So you can still make an interactive presentation as if you're doing a real live demo. So that's another way you can kind of set yourself up for success in case something fails or the application isn't ready. And the last thing I'll kind of note on before I pass it back to you, Rob, is your machine. So I mentioned that I have multiple copies and backups. I also carry my bag of tricks with me because in my situation, everything I have is Mac-based. So what's cool about that is if you use iCloud or, again, you keep backups of your copies and everything, most of your USB or even cloud-based streaming apps work. So in my case, I actually also carry with me a Google Play stick. I carry an Amazon stick, and I also have an Apple TV I carry with me when I travel. In those situations, if you don't have anything to plug into for a presentation, you can potentially stream it to whatever it is that you're working on. So if you have a TV, you can just plug it into a TV and stream it to a TV across the room. So that's another way that you can actually save yourself some hassle if you're walking into an unknown situation. If you know they have TVs, then bring your own streaming service so you can actually stream to those TVs. Rob, I'll pass it back over to you.
Those are a lot of great points. I do want to hit on the having a PowerPoint or something like that. Even if you're doing a code demo, unless like a key part of the demo is is showing it working live, I would go with a point in like a clickable demo. Set up a couple of, even if it's, I've done it off of an existing application because you don't want to spend all day, you don't want to spend a lot of time essentially reinventing the wheel to have a demo. But what I have done that has worked really well is I've gone in and I've done just take screenshots of an application, and then I can set it up so I've done it as simple as just HTML pages. It's a clickable image, and when you click on it, it doesn't matter that you clicked on that button or not. It's going to go to the next page because I can control that. I'm not going to let anybody else play with it. I'm good. And I know exactly what it's going to do. I don't care about the data and that is the nice thing about a clickable demo is being able to stick to the story that you want to tell. That is a bonus one is don't ever, if you're on a live application of any way, form, or fashion, don't ever go with somebody in the audience says, hey, could you do this? Either say, we will take a look into it, or yes, we can, but that's not part of this demo, or I'll talk to you offline or something like that. Because as soon as you do, it almost always, that's going to be the thing that breaks your entire application, breaks your demo, throws the whole thing, just like it goes completely off the rails. So and honestly, it can lose you confidence from your audience because you're telling them a story and saying, this is how it works. And this is all this good stuff. And this is all great until they say, well, hey, try this. You're like, oh yeah, we can do that. And then bam, you just lost credibility because you thought you could. And even if you say, I don't know that we can, but hey, let's try that. That's awesome if you're in the middle of like a testing demonstration and you want to be able to test this thing and you want to beat on the whole point is to break it. Awesome. If that's not your goal, then don't take that on. Even if you are 100% sure which you're 99.99999% sure that that's going to work. If you haven't tested it, if you haven't verified it, if that is not part of your script, do not go off script. It is one of those things that's like a golden rule for politicians. When they're out there stumping, that's why it's speech, 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 like script, script, script. They script everything. Do the same thing, because when you start going off script, it's real easy to get off track and to break something. So I'll give you last words here.
Well, I want to tack onto that, because when we were teaching, so if you are presenting or teaching code, something else that's very beneficial, especially for the recipient or the student as they're watching, and it's also good for you for post presentation, is copy all your code into Notepad, into a text file, and then streamline your application that you're demoing to just comments. So now as you're walking through, don't type the code, go copy it from your text and paste it in at each step, and then walk through what you're doing. This helps address two things. One, none of us write code well when someone's standing over our shoulders. We have typos, we have grammar mistakes, we just get nervous and things just go off the rails. Two, you might forget something, and having the code right there, it's like, oh yeah, I need that. So you don't miss a step. So now you don't break your train of thought or the conversation as you're walking through the presentation. What are your thoughts on that, Rob?
I agree. I think that is the best way to help yourself out, is to have comments, either have it commented out. If you want to do something that's like a progressive kind of lecture, where it's like, okay, first we're going to do these couple of lines, and then we're going to do these things, is either like, I always either have it in a step 1, step 2, step 3 code file. So I'm executing different files, or I have had some, especially if you've got like block comments, that makes it easy, because it's like, okay, now this is uncommented. Now I'm going to uncomment these 3 lines, and then you can talk through it as you go. And then the other thing, which is honestly what I've done probably more often than anything, is I'll have my full code in one file, and then I'm basically rebuilding it. But like you said, I'm not going to type it. This is way too easy, especially if you're in a language that is case sensitive or space sensitive or anything like that. It is way too easy to get type one thing off, or mistype a variable name or something, and you go through the whole thing, and then you end up spending sometimes 20 minutes chasing down a typo. Just be safe, test that code, write it beforehand, test it, make sure. And that's honestly, I think that is one of the biggest things that I see. If you go out to really any tutorial bootcamp education site, go to Udemy or anything like that, if you look the comments on anything that's code related, almost always you're going to get people, they're going to it doesn't work, code doesn't work. And sometimes it's very simple. It's like, hey, your code doesn't work because you forgot this. Now, sometimes it is more important. It's like the code doesn't work because you forgot to mention that there's this other thing you did, or there's this way that you need to set up your environment. So that's why, when we do this, a lot of times start from scratch of like, okay, there's somewhere along the way, here's where we built that environment. Now, it may be, 6 months down the road, we're teaching stuff, but it's like, if you're struggling, remember, go back to day one. Here's the notes. Here's what you need to do to get it right. What you need to do to get it right is give us feedback, is let us know. info@developreneur.com. Check us out at developreneur.com. Check us out on Developreneur on our YouTube channel. Go out to Twitter/X. It's at Developreneur. You can go out to Facebook. We have a page. You can go to LinkedIn and we have a page. If we don't, we're going to have to build one real quick, but I think we have one. And just however you can reach out to us, feel free to do so. We would love to hear back from you. We would love to get feedback, and just let us know what kind of problems you're running into, because we obviously have problems every week, and some we can talk about on the air. So we have a lot that we can go through, but it is always helpful to also see what you guys are running into and where we can help you out and talk through some of these, because it's always like you get a couple different voices. The next thing you know, you've got a situation like, oh, I didn't think about that. I thought it was just me, but no, it's actually everybody that runs into that. That being said, we'll let you get back to whatever it is that you're doing, and hopefully it is working on becoming a better developer like the rest of us. So go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time. But oh, and we didn't even touch on software. So so that's our bonus material. This one is we're gonna switch back. I totally forgot to hit you up on the software thing.
Well, and we did kind of carry that conversation on in the pre-conversation as well, because we did get into the Da Vinci and all that. I did want to throw out one tidbit though from the conversation we had. So as we were talking about doing the text files, copying your text out, doing comments and things of that nature, what the additional benefit of that, and Spring does this really well, is you can essentially hand out the template, the gutted version of your code, and hand to your students with essentially without the code, but with the guidelines. Hey, add this, do this. And now you have a tutorial or even a homework assignment that someone else could come behind you and walk through and try to do it on their own, try to learn it themselves. Now, you can still provide the solution with everything in it, but some people learn from examples. They have to walk through, they have to do it trial and error. Spring does this as well because you can actually build some of their test projects. You can do an init or complete, and the init essentially gives you all the templates, all the struts. It basically builds all the boilerplate code, and then you can go basically build your app. So basically, it's like, oh, I need this. Okay, well, here's the basics. Now start filling it in. Or it's like, oh, I can't quite remember how to do that. Say, give me a complete version. So it will actually fill in with real live examples and a fully functional application. So you can actually hit run. And there's like your REST application for your website.
Yeah, that's really good. That reminds me, we did back when I was in college, there was something that was a MIT project, I think, that was for operating systems. And it was built so that you had all these little code modules that you could write so that they would have all of the boilerplate around so they could really tighten it down to write code for this. And it's effectively what you can do in almost any language, probably anything, is you just have like an include or something like that, where you just say, okay, here's your starter app. And I need you to write, your assignment is write this function or this code. And it could just be within that as you just have it commented out, but basically or around it, say like, you're going to write, this is a function to create. This is what it's going to do. This is what it's going to take. This is how it works. And you can test it by putting it in this code and running this application. And this is what your input should be. With this input, this is what your output should be. So stuff like that is use those tools, because that is a really good way to teach, as you're walking through it, especially if it's a progressive kind of series of lectures. So you get to the point where it's like, okay, we're 5 lectures in. Here is we'll say like the model solution that we've talked about, but now here's the section you worked on today. So particularly like if a student gets lost on something, they can see it working, but they're also going to be able to like move on and not be blocked from whatever the lesson is that day. So I think that makes this a good time to wrap this one up from a video side. And then we're just going to flip onto the other side and we're going to figure out what we want to do next and where we want to go episode wise. So ta-ta for now. We will see you next time around, and we'll figure out what we're going to talk about then. And we're just going to keep on going because that's what we do. Have a good one, everybody.